It's like I put the model.
She's showing out for the camera,
I
girl.
know what to tell you.
Oh,
Girl, you the model. You the Instagram model.
it's my 21st B-Day. They said go out bright, and I'm going out bright, and I'm doing it right, and I'm doing it really tight.
All right.
Every 36 hours in America, a family stands at a second graveside. They bury another child to gun violence. The statistics are staggering. But what happened on December 30th? 2023 will make you question everything you think you know about random violence. 22-year-old Shantaves Thomas was sitting in her mother's car outside an apartment complex in Cahokia Heights, Illinois. She was scrolling through her phone, probably checking TikTok or responding to messages. Within minutes, multiple gunmen would execute her in cold blood. But here's what the police reports won't tell you. This wasn't random. Someone wanted her dead. And the reason why will leave you questioning everything you believe about family loyalty. The parking lot at Greystone Apartments became a war zone in seconds. Shantaves' mother's silver sedan was riddled with bullets. Glass scattered across the pavement like deadly confetti. The young woman who friends called the Braid Slayer slumped forward in the driver's seat. Her phone was still in her hand. TikTok still playing as her life drained away. What happened next would shock even the most experienced investigators. Shantaves' mother, Nancy Nixon, didn't learn about her daughter's murder from police officers. She found out through frantic Facebook messages and went live in desperation. The raw footage of Nancy screaming for someone to drive her to the scene went viral for all the wrong reasons. A mother begging strangers on social media to help her reach her dying child because the system had already failed them. Before we go any further, I need to be completely honest with you. Shantaves' story was buried by mainstream media outlets within 48 hours. Her family is still fighting for justice while her killers walk free, probably watching videos like this one. If you think stories like this deserve to be heard, if you believe a mother's pain matters more than your comfort zone, then prove it right now. Hit that subscribe button. But here's what really tells me everything I need to know about someone's character. If you're watching this and you don't subscribe, I want you to drop a comment explaining why. Tell me exactly why Shantaves' story isn't worth 2 seconds of your time. Go ahead, I'll wait. Because your silence. That's exactly what her killers are counting on. That's how cases like this get forgotten. How families like Nancy's get abandoned. And how murderers stay free. Everyone who knew Shantaves Thomas thought they had her figured out. She was the young woman with magic hands who could transform anyone's hair into a masterpiece. Her Instagram was filled with before and after photos that looked like professional magazine shoots. Clients drove from 3 states away just to sit in her chair because the Braid Slayer reputation was that powerful. But success in the hair game isn't just about talent. It's about territory. And Shantaves was stepping on some very dangerous toes. See, the beauty industry in East St. Louis operates more like street corners than salons. Certain neighborhoods belong to certain stylists, and when someone young and talented starts pulling clients away, older established businesses don't just lose money, they lose respect. What most people didn't know was that Shantaves' client list read like a who's who of local street royalty. Wives of dealers, girlfriends of gang members, women who paid in cash and never asked for receipts. These weren't soccer moms getting their hair done for book club. These were women who heard things, knew things, and sometimes said too much while sitting in Shantaves' chair. The family had been running from ghosts long before Shantaves was murdered. When her older brother Desmond was killed in December of 2022, everyone said it was wrong place, wrong time. But that's not what happened. Desmond was involved in a dispute over drug territory that went back months. He wasn't some innocent victim caught in crossfire. He was a target who saw it coming. After Desmond's murder, the Thomas family packed up everything and moved to Cahokia Heights. They thought distance would save them, but you can't outrun a reputation. What Nancy Nixon didn't realize was that moving her family didn't eliminate the debt her son owed. In street justice, family members inherit both protection and enemies. Shantaves knew more about her brother's death than she ever told police or her mother. She'd been getting threatening messages for months, people demanding information about where Desmond had money or drugs before he died. The hair salon became her refuge, but it also became her trap. Every new client was a potential threat. Every appointment could be a setup. The nursing school acceptance letter that arrived in November of 2023 wasn't just about career advancement. It was Shantae's escape plan. She'd already started telling certain clients she was retiring from hair to focus on healthcare. But in communities like East St. Louis, you don't just walk away from valuable connections. Some people saw her nursing school plans as betrayal. Others saw it as suspicious. 3 weeks before her murder, Shantae's posted a cryptic message on her Instagram story that disappeared within hours. The screenshot that survived showed her typing. Some people think loyalty means staying silent forever. But what happens when staying silent gets you killed too? Friends later said she'd been acting paranoid, checking her rearview mirror constantly, taking different routes home from work. The perfect victim isn't someone who's completely innocent. The perfect victim is someone who looks innocent enough that people will care when they die, but dirty enough that police won't work too hard to solve the case. December 30th, 2023 was supposed to be a quiet night. Shantae's had finished her last hair appointment of the year around 8:30 in the evening and was planning to stay home with her mother. They were watching old movies and talking about New Year's resolutions when Shantae's phone started buzzing with text messages. Someone was insisting she come to a party at Greystone Apartments, claiming they had important information about her brother Desmond. The messages came from a number she didn't recognize, but the person knew details about Desmond's death that weren't public knowledge. They mentioned specific locations where he'd been seen before his murder and names of people who might have been involved. For a young woman who'd been carrying guilt about her brother's unsolved case, this felt like the break she'd been praying for. What Shantae's didn't know was that those text messages were carefully crafted bait. Someone had studied her social media posts about missing her brother, analyzed her comments about wanting justice, and created the perfect lure. The party was real, the location was legitimate, but the person texting her was using information gathered from weeks of surveillance. At 10:42 that night, Shantae's grabbed her mother's car keys and promised Nancy she'd be back within an hour. Ring doorbell footage from their neighbor's house shows her walking to the silver sedan with purpose, not fear. She was wearing her favorite hoodie and had her phone charger in her hand because she expected to be making calls. The drive to Greystone Apartments should have taken 12 minutes, but Shantae's arrived in 8. She was eager, hopeful that tonight might finally bring answers about who killed Desmond. The parking lot was busy with people heading to and from the party. Music spilling out of second-floor windows, the kind of controlled chaos that makes witnesses unreliable. But instead of going straight into the party, Shantae sat in her mother's car for exactly 5 minutes. Phone records later revealed she was texting back and forth with the mysterious contact, trying to coordinate a meetup. The person kept stalling, asking her to wait just a few more minutes, claiming they were finishing up something important inside. Those 5 minutes were crucial because they gave the shooters time to position themselves. Security cameras from the apartment complex show at least 3 figures moving through the parking lot during that window, staying in blind spots, communicating with hand signals. This was an amateur hour. These people had military or law enforcement training. At 10:52 exactly, the execution began. Multiple shooters approached from different angles, eliminating any chance for Shantae's to escape. The attack lasted less than 30 seconds, but involved over 20 rounds of ammunition. Every shot was deliberate, every angle calculated to ensure she couldn't survive. The most chilling detail came from witness testimony that police initially dismissed. 3 different people reported seeing one of the shooters pause after the attack to look directly into the car, as if confirming the target was dead. This wasn't heat-of-the-moment violence. This was professional elimination. While Shantae's was bleeding out in her mother's car, Nancy Nixon was getting fragmented phone calls from people at the party. Nobody would give her clear information, just panicked voices saying something happened to her car. The official police response time was logged at 11 minutes, but first responders later admitted they initially went to the wrong apartment complex because the address was reported incorrectly. By the time Nancy Nixon arrived at the scene, her daughter had been pronounced dead for over 20 minutes. The silver sedan that had safely transported Shantae's to volleyball practice, hair appointments, and family dinners had become her coffin. The phone that should have been her lifeline to safety had become the weapon used to lure her to her death. The Cahokia Heights Police Department collected evidence from Shantae Thomas's murder scene with all the urgency of a routine traffic stop. Shell casings were bagged, witness statements were taken, and the crime scene was photographed. But what happened to that evidence in the weeks that followed reveals a system designed to fail families like the Nixons from the very beginning. Detective Marcus Williams was assigned as the lead investigator, but his track record should have been a red flag. In his 8 years with the department, he'd closed exactly 0 homicide cases involving young black women. His clearance rate for drug-related murders was 12%, well below the national average. Yet somehow, he was put in charge of what would become Cahokia Heights' most high-profile case of 2023. The ballistics evidence disappeared from the police evidence locker within 6 weeks of the murder. When Nancy Nixon called asking for updates, she was told the samples had been sent for testing at a state lab. But records later obtained through a Freedom of Information request showed no ballistics evidence from Shantae's case was ever logged at any testing facility in Illinois. Witness intimidation began before the police interviews were even complete. 3 people who'd been at the party and claimed to have seen suspicious activity around the parking lot received threatening phone calls within 48 hours of speaking to detectives. One witness, a 19-year-old college student named Marcus Thompson, was jumped by unknown assailants on his way to a follow-up interview and ended up in the hospital with a concussion. The most shocking revelation came when Nancy Nixon hired a private investigator using money raised through community fundraising. Within 2 weeks, the private investigator had identified at least 4 people who'd been coordinating movements in the parking lot that night. He'd also discovered cell phone tower data showing multiple burner phones in the area during the exact time frame of the murder. None of this information had been uncovered by the official police investigation. Detective Williams claimed the department lacked resources to analyze cell phone data or pursue advanced forensic techniques. But public records show the Cahokia Heights Police Department had received a federal grant of $200,000 specifically for violent crime investigation technology just 3 months before Shantae's murder. That money was never allocated to her case. The silence in the community wasn't born from fear alone. It was orchestrated by someone with serious influence. Within a week of the murder, every person who'd been at the party that night received visits from community leaders telling them to let the family grieve in peace and avoid talking to outsiders about what they'd seen. These weren't random suggestions. They were orders backed by economic pressure. Local businesses that employed people from the Greystone Apartments area suddenly started firing workers who'd spoken to police about the case. 3 different fast food restaurants and a grocery store let go of employees who'd been identified as potential witnesses. The message was clear. Cooperation with law enforcement would cost you your livelihood. What Nancy Nixon discovered through her own investigation was that someone with connections to both law enforcement and street networks was actively blocking progress on her daughter's case. Phone calls to the police station were being screened. Witness statements were being lost, and evidence was conveniently disappearing whenever real progress seemed possible. The family's private investigator was forced to stop working the case after receiving direct threats against his own family. He told Nancy that in 20 years of investigation work, he'd never encountered such systematic obstruction of a murder case. Someone with serious power wanted Shantae's case to remain unsolved, and they had the resources to make that happen. 6 months after the murder, Detective Williams was quietly transferred to a desk job handling property crimes. No explanation was given for the reassignment, and no new detective was assigned to take over Shantae's case. The file was marked inactive pending new leads, which is police code for "we're done trying." Nancy Nixon realized she was fighting more than just her daughter's killers. She was fighting a system that had been compromised from the inside, where justice could be purchased and investigations could be sabotaged by people who were supposed to protect and serve. Desmond Thomas wasn't the innocent victim everyone believed him to be. While his family grieved and the community called his death senseless, the truth about what Desmond was involved in before his murder reveals why Shantae's became a target exactly 1 year later. The story the family told police about Desmond being in the wrong place at the wrong time was a carefully constructed lie designed to protect the rest of the family. 3 months before his death in December of 2022, Desmond had stolen $40,000 from a drug operation run by a man known only as Big Mike. The theft wasn't opportunistic. It was planned revenge for Big Mike's crew jumping Desmond's cousin over a gambling debt. Desmond thought he was evening the score, but in street economics, stealing that much money is a death sentence that extends to your entire bloodline. The family knew Desmond was marked for death weeks before it happened. Nancy Nixon had been receiving anonymous calls telling her to control her son or face consequences. Desmond himself had confided in Shantaves about the threats, making her promise to look after their mother if something happened to him. What he didn't tell her was that he'd hidden the stolen money in a location only she would be able to figure out. After Desmond's murder, the threats didn't stop. They evolved. Big Mike's crew believed Desmond had told his sister where the money was hidden before he died. They were right. Shantaves knew about a storage unit in East St. Louis, where her brother had stashed the cash along with documents that could implicate several people in the drug operation, including someone working inside the police department. The family's move to Cahokia Heights was never about finding safety. It was about buying time. Nancy Nixon hoped that relocating would convince Big Mike's crew that Shantaves didn't have access to whatever Desmond had left behind. But moving to a new city doesn't erase a $40,000 debt, especially when that debt represents respect and reputation in the streets. For 11 months after Desmond's death, Shantaves received periodic messages from unknown numbers asking about her brother's gift to the family. Sometimes they were subtle, asking if Desmond had left her anything valuable before he died. Other times they were direct threats demanding she turn over what belonged to Big Mike. She never responded to any of these messages, but she also never told her mother they were still coming. The December timing of both murders wasn't coincidence. It was psychological warfare. Big Mike wanted Nancy Nixon to associate Christmas and New Year with loss, to feel the anniversary of each death as a reminder of what happened when his money was stolen. Killing Shantaves exactly 1 year after Desmond sent a message that the debt would follow the family through generations. What makes this case even more tragic is that Shantaves had already decided to give up the location of Desmond's hidden money. Her acceptance into nursing school represented a way out of the cycle that had claimed her brother. She'd planned to anonymously tip police about the storage unit after she started classes in January, hoping that would end the harassment and let her family finally heal. But Big Mike's crew couldn't risk letting Shantaves escape their influence. A nursing degree would give her economic independence and social connections that might make her dangerous to their operation. Dead people don't become healthcare workers who might recognize drug overdose patterns or report suspicious injuries to authorities. Nancy Nixon was always meant to be the final target, but Shantaves' murder served a different purpose. It was designed to break the mother's spirit before they came for her too. The hair salon wasn't just Shantaves Thomas's business. It was her cover. What police never understood, and what the family couldn't reveal without signing their own death warrants, was that Shantaves had been working as an informant for a federal drug task force for 8 months before her murder. The young woman everyone saw as an innocent victim was actually gathering intelligence on the same network that killed her brother. Federal agent Sarah Chun had approached Shantaves in April of 2023, 3 months after the family moved to Cahokia Heights. Chun knew about Desmond's stolen money and the ongoing threats against the family. She offered Shantaves a deal: provide information about Big Mike's operation through her hair salon connections, and the federal government would relocate the entire family under witness protection after they built their case. Shantaves' client base wasn't random. It was strategically cultivated. Every appointment with wives and girlfriends of crew members was an intelligence-gathering operation. While she braided hair and applied extensions, she was memorizing conversations about money drops, upcoming deals, and internal conflicts within Big Mike's organization. The federal task force was building a racketeering case that would have dismantled the entire network. But someone inside law enforcement was feeding information back to Big Mike. Every detail Shantaves reported to Agent Chin somehow made its way back to the streets within days. Safe houses were compromised. planned arrests fell through, and witnesses started disappearing. The federal investigation was being sabotaged from the inside by someone with access to classified case files. The nursing school acceptance wasn't just Shantae's dream. It was her exit strategy from the informant role. Agent Chun had promised that once Shantae started classes in January, her cooperation agreement would be complete. The family would be relocated to a different state with new identities and federal protection. Shantae was counting down the days until she could stop living the dangerous double life that was slowly destroying her mental health. 3 weeks before her murder, Shantae discovered something that changed everything. One of her regular clients, a woman named Keisha, who dated one of Big Mike's lieutenants, accidentally revealed that someone in the federal task force was on Big Mike's payroll. The corrupt agent had been warning the crew about upcoming raids and providing names of informants in exchange for monthly payments of $15,000. Shantae immediately contacted Agent Chun with this information, not knowing that Chun herself was the corrupt agent. For 8 months, Chun had been playing both sides, using Shantae to gather just enough intelligence to look productive to her supervisors while ensuring that Big Mike stayed one step ahead of any real consequences. The federal investigation was never intended to succeed. When Agent Chun realized that Shantae had figured out the corruption, she faced an impossible choice. Eliminating Shantae would protect her own criminal enterprise, but it would also end a valuable source of intelligence. Chun decided that Shantae knew too much to live, but the murder had to look like street retaliation to avoid federal scrutiny. The text messages that lured Shantae to Greystone Apartments came from a phone purchased by Agent Chun using federal funds. The important information about Desmond was carefully crafted using details from the original murder investigation that only law enforcement would know. Chun had studied Shantae's psychological profile and knew exactly what bait would be irresistible. Agent Chun coordinated directly with Big Mike's crew to plan the execution. She provided them with Shantae's schedule, her mother's car description, and detailed maps of the apartment complex. In exchange, Big Mike agreed to eliminate the only witness who could expose Chen's corruption. The murder was a joint operation between federal law enforcement and organized crime. The most horrifying aspect of this betrayal was that Nancy Nixon had been unknowingly cooperating with her daughter's killer for months. Every time she called the FBI asking for updates on Shantae's case, she was speaking to Agent Chen. Every false promise about justice and protection came from the same person who had orchestrated the murder. The federal task force was quietly disbanded 6 months after Shantae's death, with Agent Chen receiving a promotion and transfer to a white-collar crime division in another state. The official explanation was budget cuts and reorganization priorities. No one mentioned that their star informant had been murdered or that their case files had been compromised. Big Mike's operation expanded significantly in 2024, taking over territory that had previously been controlled by rival crews. Federal law enforcement seemed to have lost all interest in drug trafficking in the East St. Louis area. The $40,000 that started this cycle of violence was never recovered, but it had generated millions in profits for an organization that now operated with unofficial government protection. The evidence that could have solved Shantae Thomas's murder didn't just disappear. It was systematically destroyed by people sworn to protect and serve. Agent Chen's corruption extended far beyond her role as a double agent. She had cultivated a network of local law enforcement officers who helped maintain the illusion that investigations were proceeding while ensuring that nothing meaningful ever came to light. Detective Williams wasn't incompetent. He was compromised. Bank records that Nancy Nixon's private investigator later uncovered showed regular deposits into Williams' personal account that coincided perfectly with major developments in Shantae's case. Every time a witness came forward, every time new evidence surfaced, Williams received payments of $3,000 to $5,000 to make problems disappear. The ballistics evidence wasn't lost in transit to a testing facility. It was deliberately destroyed in the Cahokia Heights Police Department's evidence room by Officer Janet Martinez, who had been receiving monthly payments from Agent Chen for 18 months. Martinez had access to evidence lockers and the authority to sign off on evidence transfers, making her the perfect inside accomplice for evidence tampering. Phone records from the night of the murder were never properly analyzed, because they would have revealed Agent Chen's direct communication with the shooters. The Federal Task Force's communication logs showed that Chen was in constant contact with someone at Greystone Apartments from 10:30 until 11:15 that night. Those records were classified under national security protocols and sealed from local investigators. 3 witnesses who could have identified the shooters died under suspicious circumstances within 6 months of Shantae's murder. Marcus Thompson, the college student who was beaten after his first police interview, was found dead in his apartment from an apparent drug overdose in June of 2024. He had no history of drug use and had been accepted to medical school just weeks before his death. Ashley Williams, a party guest who claimed she saw Agent Chen's car in the parking lot that night, died in a single-car accident on Highway 64 in August. The crash occurred on a straight stretch of road in perfect weather conditions. Her phone was never recovered from wreckage, and traffic cameras in the area mysteriously malfunctioned for exactly 30 minutes around the time of the accident. The third witness, Kevin Brooks, simply vanished in September of 2024. His family reported him missing, but police showed little interest in investigating his disappearance. His apartment had been cleaned out professionally, with no signs of struggle or forced entry. Kevin's mother later told Nancy Nixon that federal agents had visited her son the week before he disappeared, asking him to reconsider his testimony. Nancy Nixon began receiving her own threats in October of 2024, exactly 10 months after her daughter's murder. Nancy Nixon stopped posting on social media in November of 2024. Her last Facebook update was a simple message: "Some fights are too dangerous to fight alone." 3 days later, she packed up her remaining belongings and left Cahokia Heights without telling anyone where she was going. Her phone number was disconnected, her social media accounts went dark, and the woman who had once live-streamed her pain to the world simply vanished. The house where Shantae's grew up now sits empty with a "for sale" sign that's been in the yard for 8 months. No one has toured the property. Real estate agents whisper that the listing is cursed, that bad things happen to families who try to make a fresh start in a place where so much blood has been spilled. Agent Chen continues her career with the federal government, now investigating financial crimes in Denver, Colorado. She received a commendation for her work on the East St. Louis Drug Task Force and was featured in a law enforcement magazine as an example of effective community policing. Detective Williams retired with full benefits and moved to Florida. Officer Martinez was promoted to sergeant. Here's your moment of truth. Shantae Thomas was betrayed by every system that promised to protect her, silenced by people who took an oath to serve justice, and abandoned by a society that consumes these stories like entertainment. Her mother fought alone until the fight became too dangerous to continue. If this story matters to you, if her life was worth more than 18 minutes of your time, then prove it. Subscribe to this channel and share this video until it becomes impossible to ignore. But if you're going to scroll past without subscribing, I need you to do something else. Drop a comment and tell me exactly why Shantae's story doesn't deserve 2 seconds of your effort. Explain to me why Agent Chen deserves to keep her badge while Nancy Nixon lives in hiding. Tell me why this case should stay buried while the people who killed a 22-year-old woman get promoted and praised. Because that comment will reveal everything I need to know about who you really are when nobody's watching. And honestly, I'm fascinated to see what excuse you'll use to justify looking the other way.